and how I move forward, because he has blessed me so much. God has given me an intelligent mind, enough that I am starting studies to become a pilot in fall, and that my grandfather always said never to give up on your studies. Always keep on top of your studies. God will bless you, and he will provide for you financially, and he kind of already has. And I tend to keep my relationship with God, as I strongly suggest all of you do. And if you don't know Yeshua today, talk to us. There are tons of people here that would be more than happy to help you get to know him, because he's been an avid part in my family's life and in my grandfather's life, and there are so many people who are saved because of him, and I would like to keep that going. Thank you.
Say something, or you can't?
I'm going to say something. Okay, carry on. Okay, thank you. When I was asked to speak of Bill, the first word that came to me was the word that came to most of us. Hello, this is Bill. It very much helps to define the gentleness of his spirit. Bill was so much more than a long list of tasks and classes and ministries that he had faithfully performed over the last 27 years here, but many more in so many other places. Humble, unassuming, quiet, approachable, a friend and mentor to me and everyone that asked for his help. He always had time for people. He made you feel welcomed. He treated each person like you were his friend. For the longest time, I thought, wow, Bill really likes me. Then I realized he made everyone feel that way. And it wasn't until sometimes later that I realized he really did like me and everyone else that he had spent time with. He was genuine in his relationships. What you saw was what you got. He was approachable. He would answer any question without making you feel badly. Bill, what's a girdle? Why do they wear it? And he would tell you without embarrassing you, without making you feel like it was a silly question, but you would get the answer that you wanted or that you needed, and you would get so much more. Bill was a voracious leader or reader. His opinions were knowledgeable and they mattered. He could quote the scripture, the Talmud, the Gemara, the Mishnah. He knew the ways of the fathers of his faith. If Bill said that this was the way to do something, no one argued with him. Nobody would challenge him because Bill knew. Bill studied. Bill showed himself approved in everything that he did. He was rarely rattled with circumstances or situations or events of crisis, calmly and steadily counseling and leading others forward. He took time to allow people to make their mistakes and continue without interruption or judgment. I know a lot of you guys come to the Torah table and done your first chant for Torah honors, and you screwed it up. But Bill never interrupted. Bill wouldn't correct you. If you asked him later, how did I do, he would tell you. It was okay. If you did come to read or to do the New Covenant portion, and he didn't forget your name, that was a rare occasion. It was very endearing to have Bill forget my name. Bill was a consummate teacher and role model. He proudly lived and explained his faith in Yeshua from a Jewish perspective. He was able to connect the dots for us. All those spaces that we didn't know how they fit together. Bill had an explanation for us. He was consistent and unwavering in his presentation of weekly and holy day liturgies, chants, and prayers. I spent time with him and I asked him, Bill, how many times have you missed service over the 27 years? And he said, well, 4 or 5 in 27 years. Other than vacations, he was always here. He was here at 9 o'clock in the morning every Tuesday until most Fridays and Friday night and Shabbat morning, and then he would come and do the Shachrit in the morning. He was dedicated to what he did. He loved what he did. He brought the holy days to life in Yeshua, including aspects lost to other mainstream believers. While they're fondling around wondering where they came from and how things were done and why they worship a Jewish rabbi. And Bill had the answers. We had an amazing gift in Bill's ability to lead an Orthodox style service. Other congregations throughout the world struggle to have such a service led by such a talented rabbi. There was a man that came this last Shabbat. He was a first-time visitor. And we proceeded with the service. And he leaned over and he asked, this is a Messianic congregation, isn't it? It is. There are Messianic congregations throughout the world who have no liturgy or very little liturgy. And those that do, many of those that do, were taught by Bill. Men that have shown themselves to be orthodox in their ways all have little tapes, and a bunch of them, where they would learn from Bill how to and why. I've taken photographs and videos of this congregation's services and of the people that are here for many years. Myself, Tim Smith, the sound guy, Kevin Coulter, the video guy, Joanne Tischler, the Hebrew girl. We're putting together a project. And the project will consist of teaching videos that will have the video as instruction as to how things happen. There are videos of Bill doing only the chants of each of the holy days. There will be written material that they could download and print so that a congregation could reproduce this information so that everybody can partake. A little or a lot. They get to choose. But they learn from the man who knew it best. In the Messianic community, he was renowned for his ability to be chazan. In that vein, he wrote Messianic Sidurs and Machzor, which encompass liturgy and tradition, but always interwoven with Yeshua. As Sarah said, the thing that was foremost in his life was Yeshua, the salvation that we need, and to walk that walk. It was interwoven in his books. Yeshua was so blatantly obvious to Bill in the traditions of his ancestry. Where their eyes were blinded, his eyes had been open, and he could explain to us why. He was all about salvation through Yeshua, first and foremost. No matter what he taught, tradition or this or that or whatever it was always about walking with Yeshua. He was a patient and kind teacher. While preparing me to continue his legacy, he drove me crazy. I'd ask him, Bill, how did I do? How did it go? What did I need to do? And he would say, you did just fine. Or, it went well. Dang. If I asked my daughter, Kelly, she'd tell me. You obviously weren't comfortable with that, Dad. But you can get better. Just keep practicing. During the past year, my respect for him increased. He was not only a mentor and a teacher. More personally, he was kind and gentle, truly a concerned friend. He always asked about my sons, how they were doing. Steve, pastor of this congregation, meeting up with crazy people, waving guns at him. My son, Joe, the youngest elder of a congregation that I know of. He loved that. He loved to see that the young people that he had taught went out into the world and made a difference. As we worked together on the video project, he would frequently do a sidebar about his childhood or the time in Pueblo or the army or meeting and marrying Betty. Raising Elaine, Bernie, talked of his grandchildren and the sports activities that he was so proud of. His love for his family was always evident. He spoke of Elaine and her commitment to the praise team and how through her voice she was able to, as well, lead this congregation into the throne room of God. He was also very pleased with Keith and John, especially when they would come to the Bema for Torah honors. They're now both studying to lead the service. Sarah, he loved you so much for your accomplishments, but more for who you have become, for those trials, especially in Israel, that you had to go through, all the craziness, and how you came through that, and how you become the young lady that he was so very proud of. He was very honored and well pleased with the men of this congregation's ability to come forth and to lead service. I'm proud, so proud of our congregation, being able to step up since his diagnosis. Eclectic, that's us. A few weeks ago, on this very pulpit, we had a European, a Mexican, a Belarusian, a Korean, a Jew, and a Filipino, all in the same service. To that I say, go Bill. Bill and Betty were a model couple and a great team. Bill could counsel and guide and instruct the needy through any difficulty. And Betty, she would cheerlead the miraculous outcome that God had performed, seeing that the whole tapestry of life is gradually coming together. And we love that. During the men's Bible study yesterday, we had very little time to do the things that we wanted to do. There were so many Bill stories. Each man had a personal account of Bill's kindness, how he personally welcomed them here at Roeh, how he was a gentle teacher, became a trusted mentor and friend. Common threads were his knowledge of Torah, Mishnah, his ability to explain law and tradition, and how he gave heart to the liturgy. It's not just a bunch of words, as many see it as repetitive. Bill showed us that through his words, when we didn't have our own words to come before the Father, these were the words that he gave us, that we could prepare in a way that our Lord expected. You can't just barge into the throne room of God. There is protocol, and Bill showed us that. In November, it was my honor and blessing, and my honor's blessing, to escort Bill and Betty on their last major adventure to the Messianic Leadership Conference. His presence was announced at the very first meeting. There was a guy, Troy B. Wallace, who was a member of this congregation and who has become the right-hand man of Jonathan Burness. And he called Bill out. He let everybody know that he was there and that he was there to say goodbye. Bill was well known in this group, and numerous men and women of prestige, well known or known very little in the Messianic movement, but they took time to have intentional, specific, and personal conversation with him and Betty over the 3 days there. They honored him, the man, and his pastoral work. Though tired and weak after the conference, Bill was even patient with the TSA guys. Oh, man, they patted him down. They wanted him. They took his shoes off. Then they decided something was wrong. So they took him back into the little room, stood him up, patted him down again, wanted him again, did all this other stuff, until they were finally convinced that Bill was no threat. Men of brilliance. Bill, a terrorist. Oh my gosh. For 27 years, Roeh has been led by Bill and Bert as a team, often with Bert as the gregarious front man, and Bill is the quiet, steady, behind-the-scenes straight man. But Bill was warm and also very funny in his own right. His memorable humor surfaced when he would perform with Betty at the Hanukkah programs. Golda, do you love me? Or when we did the Western thing, do you remember that? Here, chickie, chickie, chickie. I don't want to hurt you. I just want to make you kosher. Then there was the mystery box that he brought to Simchat Torah this last year. It sat here on a table, and everybody wondered, what's in the box? And at the end of the service, he withdrew 2 hats, a cowboy hat for himself and a bowler for Bert. Then he and Bert reprised their rendition of Adon Olam, a little bit of what you heard earlier. It's a scene that we'll remember forever. Dancing brought him joy, especially Bill's interpretation of, if I were a rich man, ba-da-dee-da. You've all seen it, you know. Or what my family affectionately refers to as the Bill and Betty shuffle, as they slowly moved around the dance floor. She'd look at him with eyes of love, and he at her the same way. So in love for so long. Once at a camping trip, I heard that Bill was asked, is there a blessing to catch a fish? And he said, of course there's a blessing for everything. Okay, now we all know the blessing. How does the blessing start? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Catch a fish. I think he and John were the only ones that caught a fish that day. Is that right? I think it was. He never refused an opportunity to bless a new home or business, to perform a baby naming, a mikvah, a funeral, a wedding. It was important to Bill that God be a part of every aspect of all of our lives. I remember one morning for Shakri, we went to a pharmacy, and we did Shakri in the pharmacy. We blew the shofar, we had a great meal, we had a great blessing. And one of the brothers pointed out that after we did that shakrit there, man, that pharmacy became really successful. Praise God. I had a guy come here one time. He was from out of town, and he had grown up and been in a congregation where the cantor was very operatic, well-trained. great voice. And he looked at me and he said, Bill's not a cantor. I wanted to shoot him in the face with a bazooka. I thought, calm down. This guy has been deprived. He has been shown a cantor who was a great voice. But we had a cantor that had a heart for us. The words that he spoke and chanted, it was all out of love. Boy, I felt sorry for that guy after that. I remember a time we visited Rabbi Weiss, who is a well-known cantor in Colorado, Wyoming, and the East Coast, up and down, blah, blah, blah. And Bill and I went to visit with him, and Bill brought his book to present to Cantor Weiss. Well, Cantor Weiss was a teacher too, so he immediately opened up the book, turned to a certain page, and said, okay, Bill, how does this chant go? I was like, he's getting tested. And he did, and he passed the test with flying colors. Rabbi Weiss was well pleased that I was studying with such a knowledgeable rabbi. He accepted Bill for who he was. Bill multiplied his talents and gained for his master innumerable souls. Do you remember the challenge? I challenge you today, he would say so very often, for us to spread the gospel to the people that God put before us. And l'dor v'dor, from generation to generation. This is Bill's legacy to pass on, his love of liturgy, and see it continue. He was immensely blessed to see old and young men wanting to learn the liturgy and to carry on this legacy. Several have shown interest, and I'm sure they'll take advantage of this project to learn the liturgy. We honor him not by losing what he has taught us. Liturgy is not just rote recitation of words, but it's important is to prepare us to come before the Lord. I saw him last about 10 days ago, and the thing that he told me that stuck with me the most is, it went so fast. I'll hold on to those words, and I think you should too. We have to live every day in the moment. Pray unceasingly. Share the gospel. Know who our Father is. To love each other. Forgiveness. All the things that Bill is he's the icon of that. I've never heard him speak an ill word of anybody, except for Bert. And even then, it was a gentle kidding. And it was about the liturgy. I'll close with the words that Kelly gave me. We can be better. We just need to keep practicing.
Some of the greatest regrets that I have are the moments where I didn't pay attention to the opportunity. I didn't seize the opportunity. Tonight, I don't want to have this regret. So let me share a few words with you and never regret this moment. In 1953, maybe it was 54, President Eisenhower was awarding a soldier the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was yet another soldier who had been born and raised in Pueblo, Colorado. And President Eisenhower said, "What is it with the water in Pueblo that produces such heroes?" Pueblo is known as the home of heroes because it has so many Congressional Medal of Honor recipients. Now, I'm from Denver, and Pueblo is a steel mill town, and that was the town that we all made the butt of jokes It's not the Queen City of the Plains. It's Pueblo, Colorado, the home of heroes. Pueblo, Colorado has a lot of unassuming people who would aw shucks their success, and they did. But you can't put that light underneath the bushel because Pueblo, Colorado is the home of heroes. If you want to know why he looked good in a cowboy hat, he was from Pueblo. I feel like I'm about to steal the running vehicle on a cold day to drive to school as well. I can't believe nobody else has mentioned this, so let me just pull up a couple of things on my phone. And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. Some of you already know this story. Unrolling it, he found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and to recover sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And then he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. And the rest of the congregation stared at him wide-eyed, not knowing what else to think. He said, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Sometimes it happens for us, and we don't recognize it. We don't see it. Sometimes it's so blatantly obvious that we can't see what we're seeing because we're not sure what to make of it. Sometimes it's a negative of what will be a positive, and I think we saw that yesterday. Friday, we were at the graveside, and a train came up and stopped at the entrance to the cemetery. And it was as if I was looking at a negative, not for Bill's sake, but for Betty's sake. Because that day, the train came, no one got on it, and no one was hauled away. And when the train pulled away, the living came up over the tracks to visit the dead. If you understand photography and you understand how a negative works, I think you can understand the positive. We have a wonderful hope of resurrection. Amen. And the verse that somebody somehow keeps missing, and I got to be the guy who steals this running warm car and run off to school with it. It's Zechariah 8:23. "This is what the Lord of heaven's armies says. In those days, 10 men from different nations and languages of the world will clutch at the sleeve of one Jew, and they will say, 'Please, let us walk with you, for we have heard that God is with you.'" I think that's been fulfilled here. We've all met somebody from Russia, South America, Central America, Africa, pretty much everywhere except the Antarctic. And I'd be willing to bet a penguin would want to grab hold of Bill's seat. So check that one off. That's already been fulfilled. And it was done right here at Roeh, Israel. Bill, he was quite the Jew, and I was one of those guys who was very pleased to take hold and say, this is back in Glendale when I owned a little condominium, and Bill and Betty were in an apartment across the street. And I said, "I think I need to get to know you." And I'm so thankful that I did.
Rabbi Berg, I have never called Rabbi Berg, "Hey Bill." I have always called him sir, and it irritated him sometimes. But I've never been able to call him other than Rabbi, Rev Zeb, or sir. So he was rabbi to 3 generations of my family. And I've titled what little things I'm going to say from something my son said about him. When my son was a teen, and those of you, Bert, Jay, Chaim, those of you who knew my son as a teen, he was not an easy teen. And he was not easily impressed. But what he said to me one time was, regarding Rabbi Bill, the more I know about him, the more impressed I get. And that's a very good summary of Bill. Rabbi Bill. I'm trying to call him Bill, but it's hard. As I said, he was rabbi to 3 generations of my family. I think I've known him, the first time I met him, 1986 or 7 or so, when I first came here. He was here in this building, even though he wasn't Chazan here. He was having a meeting with Eliezer Urbach, Monty Judah, Ira Brower, and so on. And I think that's where I met him. I didn't know who he was. I didn't get to know him. Betty not, so it must be the right time for him. I didn't get to know him till 27 years ago, real well, when he came here to be the Chazan. The Bergs, they're not old enough to be my parents. They're in the generation between my mother and me, so they're not my parents' generation, but they were my parents. And to Barry, Rebbe was Zadie, father, uncle, teacher, and everything else. And they have their own relationship, which someday you should ask Barry about. There wasn't a single life cycle event in our family that he didn't officiate at or jointly officiate. From Barry's birth, the first thing when I was coming out of fuzz of semi-consciousness, and I looked over at the side of the bed in the hospital, was Rabbi Berg had Barry in his arms, handing him to Betty. From the isolate, first person to touch him, and the Brit Milah, and the Pidyon Haben, and the Bar Mitzvah, and the first Tefillin, and Barry earned earned the Ner Tamid of Boy Scouts, Eagle Court of Honor. Rabbi Berg supervised all those things, and some of them were not easy because he was dealing with his own. He was recovering from open heart surgery at some of that time, his radiation, and other things. And he slept one time all the way to South Denver because Barry had won a Boy Scout award for Ner Tamid because of his religious studies, which were led by Rabbi Berg. And Barry refused to take his award from his troop master. He wanted it from the Rabbi. And Rabbi has to go to a place he doesn't know, to people he doesn't know, at night. And he was recovering from one of his medical issues at the time. And came all the way down there in front of a bunch of noisy boys to give Barry the award. And I asked him why he was so willing to do that. And he says, you never pass up an opportunity to speak Yeshua's name into this situation, always. And of course, my mother was very close to him, and he officiated at her 75th, 80th, and 85th birthday shachritz. That was important to her funeral. And Barry and Anya's wedding, of course. And you all know how soft-spoken he was. He was not a strong person. And as I said, Barry was not the simplest teenager, and he wasn't the simplest kid either. And there are several of us in this room have very strong personalities, and Barry did not obey us. But and some of you, Bert may remember, others may remember, more than once when I was working with Rabbi Bill on the one or more of his publications, Barry trashed the office over there. Everything in the office became building materials, and Bert more than once walked in there, turned around, and walked out, so there wouldn't be a fire. But Barry would always obey Rabbi Bill when he was told what to do. And I don't know the magic. I don't know what produced that. You got to ask him. We all know Rabbi Berg has his love of liturgy. I'm going to call this next part the Reb Zev Hit Parade. You know his name is Zev, right? The Reb Zev Hit Parade, okay? Some of you heard that he is known as a cantor. I had no idea, because I'm not from Denver, how well known he is and how impressive he is and how famous he is in the Jewish community. When Barry had his bris, we had arranged that, Rabbi J. Fader, of course, this moil of the community did the surgery, but he couldn't and he refused to pray with a bunch of Messianics. We hit the trifecta because he asked me, who's the Sandik? Chaim Urbach. Who's the Rebbe of where you go? Bert Yellen. And who's going to do the praying? Bill Berg. That was it. Can't go near you people. But he did the surgery, and Rabbi Bill did the chazanut. And the word got out before the bris, because as it turns out, a relative of ours, our cousin, Ruby Goldberg, was friends with Martha Rosenberg, who was Betty Berg's mother, who of course knows Bill's chazanut. The word went across to the west side. And when we had the bris, there was all kinds of Jewish people in my dining room that I don't know. Because they heard the chazanut is Bill Berg. And at the end of the bris, people are coming out to me going, what a mechaya? And I thought they meant the bris. Such chazanut, what I can't do. Oh, and by the way, congratulations on the bar mitzvah, on the bris. Okay, so I was starting to get to know what he's like and how important he is. He also was, Rebbe, to me, he was, as someone else had said earlier, he's totally unflappable. Nothing ever bothered him. He absolutely adored shachrit, and he would go anywhere to make it happen. And we have had shachrit absolutely in a pharmacy. We've done the Bircha Amazon in the deli. We have had, on holy days, there was a little stretch here where the rental church needed this space more frequently than they do now. So sometimes we would have the second day, holy day, at my house that was big enough to fit everybody. And Rabbi Bill would come with the 2 Torahs and the folding chairs and everything else, and we would set up in my dining room or my back porch or whatever, and we would have whatever holy day it was, intermediate day of Pesach, Shavuot, whatever. By the way, that's the only thing he ever teased me about in all the years that I've known him. One of those trips, the yad to one of the 2 Torahs here got lost. And I don't know if it fell in the car or someplace. And of course, Rabbi Bill, who didn't have the flexibility to climb in the trunk, and me, I have damaged eyesight, we couldn't find it. So for years, right up until a month before he died, he still teased me about, it's your fault that I lost that yad. So if you're still missing a yad, let me know. It'll become, we'll get one and it'll become the Bill Berg Memorial Yad. We'll replace the second. We will officially award it to his replacement, Chazan. He was unflappable, like someone else said, and what impressed me the most is he didn't have to put on a black bekishe, tzitziot, the fedora to be Jewish. He had those things. He wore them. Of course he did. But he didn't have to. My favorite and the most Jewish thing I've ever seen about him was a shachrit where he was going to a picnic at Bert's house because it was a holiday, and right after shachrit there was a whatever event. And he was in the baggy shorts with the IDF T-shirt and the floppy sun hat and the knee socks. Laying to Phil and telling me, go get the Sidurim. Yes, sir. Yes, Rabbi. He was a yid. It didn't matter what he had on, didn't have on. In my house, he would come and prepare to pray, and my cat was attached to him. Shmulik. I didn't name him that, Rabbi Berg did. Rabbi Berg was the only chazan I have ever met, and I've been around many because I've attended Orthodox synagogues in many places. He could daven the Shmona Esrei with a cat wrapped around his shoes, putting fur on his pants cuffs. Didn't bother him. He was so delighted to be able to have people around him and enjoy the liturgy. He didn't care. More importantly, his expertise was not just what he knew and that he could sing and that he could perform. He was a masterful singer. He was a great tenor with whatever. You can ask my daughter-in-law. Sustain. He had sustain. But his heart was liturgy so much that he produced too. And I've heard it said here he made a siddur. But you don't know. He's done 7 documents. He's published 7 things. The siddur, the makser, the Tahara, the blessings in the room of purification, the blessing of the new month, the 13 principles of faith. Maimonides should turn in his grave and read the words because they're good. Tu B'Shavat Seder. And of course, the last one, we are editing his, typing his darashes. It just flowed out of him. It was not an effort to him. It was his pleasure. And the last part, I'll call this one, Whatever gegangen zu machen mir lachen. Don't make me laugh. He was funny. And some of you know and have seen his sense of humor. He was delightfully funny. And we used to have, when we were publishing these books, and we'd work in that back when the offices were on that side, sometimes I'd nudge him to ask him to, sing me a Yiddish song. And I've learned real quick that if you just ask him for things like "Komm hier, du Philosoph," or "Der Rabbi Elimelech," he knew all those. So you couldn't stump him with us der Rabbi lacht. We know us der Rabbi lacht, right? We sang that one time, Shachrit, the whole dance and all this Hasidim. So I was trying to trip him up. Didn't work. I would ask him things, it was crazy. I would ask him stuff like, I want to hear Oyvind Pribacek, I want the version that was in the Rosh Hashanah Mandlin radio special. I want that. He could do it. I got down. I was really stretching. Molly Pecan, Yiddle Midden Fiddle. Give me any song from the play. I'll give you 5 points. Style point if you can actually sing one of them. He could. Blew me away, and that's like 100 years old, right? And I said, if I had asked for him to do Weird Al Yankovic, Pretty Flavor, but he probably could have. I never asked that. One day I go in there, and he's singing My Romania, from Aaron Lebedev. And I says to him, we don't know where in Europe you're from. I'm a Sicilian Litvaker. Why are we singing about Romania? And he said, well, Berg walked by with a cowboy hat. And being we're in the Wild West, I thought I should sing a country song. And I'm standing there with my mouth off, and I go, wow, Romania's a country, right? I'm going to do Jack Benny for a minute, because that's what I did. And everybody at Shachrit knows the number one on the Rebbe Berg hit parade, of course, was Adon Olam to the melody of what? Jimmy Crackhorn. Who said that? My son, Jimmy Crackhorn. That was actually number 2. Number 1, what I really wanted, I was here many years ago, and I hope somebody recorded it. Roeh had a talent show, either for Hanukkah or Purim, whatever. And Rabbi Berg was sitting over there on a stool. You're going to laugh, right? And his talent act was, he did a darash that featured a pilpul between, I don't know what he named, Rabbi Moshe Kapoya, Rabbi Moshe Popik, right? Moshe Kapoya was from the forwards, the Jewish daily forward, the Moshe upside down. So between Rabbi Moshe upside down and Rabbi Moshe belly button, he did a pilpul on a blotted Talmud that has never been written, I guarantee. It may have been scripted, most of it seemed ad-libbed, but I would pay big money for a tape of that. I would love to have that. It should be preserved. The kids should learn my son should learn how to do it. Use it at the next time we have a talent show at a holiday. Rebbe's real love is the same thing that's on the little brochure there, Medor Lidor, from generation to generation. He was not a chazan, as we've heard, that just sang liturgy because he loved it or because he wanted to perform. He really loved to teach it. And it really was his delight to see someone in the next generation or the third generation who found the liturgy to be sacred and precious enough to want to learn it. And I was happy he lived long enough not just to see my son Barry, who he loved and who can do the entire Shachrit because of him. And more importantly, Barry walks with the Lord because of him. Or Jaden and others young people that I have heard in that room over there at Shachrit, take the roll and chant. I was so thrilled when the Katzes, Rebbe David Katz, brought his kids, Sophie and Zach, And as soon as Rabbi Berg sees kids at the table, good, you daven over here. You do the avot. Zach, do the avot. Let me hear how you know the avot. And he had them davening the liturgy. And he was so proud of how well they did that whatever holy day that was, it might have been around Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah, he came up in this bima on the holy day and talked about those kids and how thrilled he was to see it had reached their generation. That was really where his heart was, not just to perform it or to pass it on. And he was excellent at that. The last thing, and as I said, I brought you, I'll put it in the back. This is my dining room table. This is Rabbi Berg. His delight was to enjoy these things any place he could. This was one of those days with schlepping the folding chairs, and we use a tali to make an ark over the two Torahs. I haven't told Betty this. His witness is working still. On the day they died, I got a phone call from Rabbi Ben Last, who was the chief rabbi of all the Chevra Kadisha in Denver, which is the societies that take care of preparing bodies. And he called me to say, I had no idea. They know who he is. And he called me to say, we know who he is. If you want us to do the honor of preparing his body, we will. And I said, that's not my call. I'll call the family. I did. We had already had the arrangement. Rabbi Berg's orders was that the Chevra Kadisha that Rabbi Berg trained, his men, the faithful ones, some of them sitting here, would do his preparations, and his family defended his wishes. So Betty told me what to say, and I called Rabbi Last back to tell him. But I didn't catch him. I put a message, and I told him, Rabbi Berg has trained his own Chevra Kadisha, and the men who are loyal to him will it's going to be private, and they'll take care of this. And I thought that was the end of it. And then my phone rings, and Rabbi Last calls. He says, I didn't call to give you tzores or to be schnorrer or anything else about this. I'm impressed. This man trained the Chevra Kadisha himself, yes. The men that are loyal to him are that faithful that they will take on this responsibility themselves. They're not going to dump it on the leaders of the Jewish community to do something that's hard to do. Nope, they're not going to do that. His family's going to defend it, yes. And he says, I'm really proud of you guys. This is the chief rabbi, the Orthodox chief rabbi of the Chevra Kadisha. So I don't know you guys well, but I'm really proud of you. And if you ever need anything, you call me. Don't you go to the synagogue rabbis. Don't you get stuck with the Orthodox funeral party. You call me, because I want to know you guys. So look at the phone. Yes, Rabbi. Yes. Oh, okay, yes, Rabbi. And I called Elaine and said, you know what? I don't think we've seen the end of all the things that Rabbi Berg's Life and Witness is going to produce. And I told her, in fact, I don't think we've seen the beginning yet. And it hurt me that he had to die for this thing that he wanted so much, to reach in and touch the Jewish community, to show them who we are, to give them a reason to touch back, that he had to die for that to happen. But you know what? He's in good company. Because a long time ago, another Jewish man had to die for his vision and his father's will. So Rabbi Berg's in really good company of having to do that. And literally, he's in that company now.
Good evening. I'm Mike Chirochak, and I belong to Congregation Roeh, Israel. What you've heard and what you've seen and what you're going to hear doesn't even scratch the surface of who Bill Berg is. And so we just do the best that we can to try and give you a little perspective on what makes him tick. So just appreciate that. My family and I first met Bill and Betty back in 1986 when he was the Messianic rabbi in the Colorado Springs congregation, which is named Kehilat Sharit Yisrael. And so back in those early days, the congregation had no permanent place to meet, and so everything that had to happen was temporary. Everything got slept in the morning on Saturday and slept out in the afternoon on Saturday afternoon, and everything got cleaned up And then it had to be a repeat, week after week after week. And so we get into various congregations, various churches by leasing them. And so you think, well, okay, so we have a one-year lease and things are going to be kind of rosy for a year. But it doesn't quite happen that way. People being what they are, and they start rumors and things. And so one of the things that happened was that one of the churches that we were leasing thought that we were slaughtering an animal, a Passover lamb, in the parking lot. Well, it turns out that we weren't. We were cooking the meat in the parking lot. Somebody already took care of the nasty stuff. However, rumors being what they are, they took hold and we were asked to leave. Okay, so you pack everything up and you find a new building and you settle in, you sign another lease and you think, this is going to be okay, not too bad. So you schlep in, schlep out, and then somebody complains because we use too much toilet paper. Okay, now go figure that. So we were asked to leave. But here's Bill, the rock, the steady person. None of this is really shaking his faith. It's just, he's just plodding along, prepares the worship service, has to make sure everything is in order. You know, he shouldn't have to deal with toilet paper. Just the way it goes. We had some really good times too. Our first son, Adam, who's now in his 40s, was the first bar mitzvah b'Yeshua in that congregation. And so that is a real special blessing for us. And of course, Bill tutored him. That's what he does. And speaking of Adam, I shared Bill's passing with him, and he said, Dad, would you share this? So he says, that's painful to hear. I'm deeply saddened by his passing. I'm sure Betty is surrounded by prayers and people who love them both. Bill has been a part of our lives since before I was a teenager. I'll remember him as a strong leader, dedicated to his faith and family, and most impactful in my life as a teacher and positive role model. So this is from a guy who was bar mitzvah 3 decades ago or more. So our second son was also bar mitzvah by Bill in a Colorado Springs congregation. And of course, he and Betty moved up here in about 1991. And my family moved up here in 1993. And our third son was bar mitzvah with Bill as the leader. And so that was pretty interesting. Bill was always ready, always willing, always capable when he was talking about the Jewishness of our faith. And if you were willing to listen, he was willing to explain the interconnectivity of the Tanakh and the Brit Hadashah, the New Covenant. And he was always willing to explain how Yeshua is woven throughout the Tanakh and revealed in the Brit Hadashah. And he's very good at it. He's very good at it because it's not only in his head, not only in his heart, it's in his soul. It's who he is. And boy, it really comes out strong. Other folks have mentioned the Siddur. This was something that was on his heart, and it is available in our storehouse for anybody who's interested. I have to put that little plug in there. It took him a long time to do it, but by golly, he did it, and now it's available to the world. So it's a wonderful thing. Yep. So here he is. We were blessed as a congregation and as individuals to have him among us for these 3 decades. He was a steady, calming influence, and he was respected by all who met him. He's the most humble person, the most unpretentious person that I have ever known in my life. And not only are my life, but our lives are blessed because of him. So we'll miss him, of course, but we'll meet him again in the presence of our Messiah. Amen. And let's not forget that he was also a veteran of the Vietnam era. And not only did he serve his God honorably, but he served his country honorably. God bless you all.
Thank you, Mike. My name is Jay McMaster, and my wife Patty and I have known Bill and Betty for the last 26 years. And I'm not sure what I can say other than share a few stories of what's not already been said and known about Bill. The calming influence, always there, ready and willing to give a testimony, to give reason for his belief in his faith. Easygoing, quiet-spirited, loving, kind. Dave talked about, when the men would come forward and practice and prepare for doing some of the, at the Aliyah and so forth. He was never unkind to them. He would chat with them and talk with them. Something that recently happened to me because of what's been going on, and Dave gathering the men together to come forward and to carry Bill's legacy on with the liturgy. I called Bill and Betty one Shabbat because I had heard they weren't going to be coming to shul, and I let them know. I said, "Well, Betty, tell Bill I'm going to be doing the Ritzei Vimnukatenu," and it was important to me for Bill to be there. And anyway, so I hear from Betty. Betty says, "No, we're going to have to make it then." And so that day I did it the best I could under the tutelage of Dave and Bill from the time I spent together with them. And I was back there with Mike and a couple of the other trustees, and someone came back and told me, "Bill wants to see you." Well, I was in the Army too, and Bill was in the Army, and I felt like at that moment that I was the private, and, and the sergeant was calling me back to, So I go back there kind of sheepishly, and Bill's back there sitting down in his chair, and I sit down. "Hi, Bill, you wanted to see me?" He says, "Yes." And he looks me in the eyes, and he says, first thing he says was, "You did a good job, very good job." And that touched my heart, because I had really practiced, and I know there's lots of room for improvement. Where's Kelly? But, and I told Bill, I says, "Bill, a lot of us men have been here for many, many years, and we've just become accustomed to you being there. And it's sort of, we get set in our ways and thinking that, oh, Bill's always going to be there." We don't actually think that perhaps, but we kind of act that out. It's like Bert. Well, Bert's always going to be there. But now, after the last 6 months or so since May, and Bill found this out, we realized we had a brother to step up and to lead the rest of the men forward to carry on Bill's legacy, which, as you all know, was very, very important to him. This liturgy, he was the liturgy meister. And, Bert talked about it briefly in the very beginning, and I think everybody else has touched upon it. It meant so much to him. And, we've gone so far, there's a couple brothers here, we've gone so far in recording Bill to put it on one of those programs they have on the computer where you can speed up or slow down. So instead of being, full-time, full speed, you're able to slow it down to half speed or whatever, so we could hear Bill's intonations and the words. Because he had been doing this so long and he was so good at this thing, we wanted to be able to enunciate all the words and so forth. But we've got, as Dave mentioned, we've got videos of Bill up here. We've got recordings. We've got everything, and there's a good many of us that are going forward to, out of respect and love, in memory of Bill, to come forward and help out here and back him up. We've got his six, so to speak. So there's so much to say. It's hard to just to take 26 years. We met Bill and Betty, I believe it might have been at the Herzekals, and I think Larry and Bess are here tonight, at one of their Havaras. And, we fell in love with them right from the beginning. And, Betty was the one that had the physical sword, and she would unsheath it, and she would tell Bill, "Well, if you're not going to talk to him, I will." And she did, and she would. And Bill was, the introvert. He was complex. There was so much about Bill. But we fell in love with him, and we spent many, many Havurah and a Passover with them. took trips into the mountains and heard stories about their children, good stories. And he loved you all. The time I was able to spend with him over the last 6 months, he shared a lot from his heart. And Bernie, I shared with you a little bit the other day, you know, I've never seen Bill cry before, but there was a couple times after lunch with him and everything else, and him sharing with the love that he had for you, Bernie, and Elaine, and of course Betty, and his grandchildren. That you know, he was ready as far as with the Lord, but he wasn't quite ready. Because I asked him one time, Betty, Bill, are you ready? And he says, well, not really. He says, I am, but, you know, he was leaving us behind. And this is the time, this is a few months back now. He wasn't as weak as he had gotten. And, but Bill was very, very solid in his faith and his belief and where he was going. And it was just it was an honor and a pleasure to have known him for so long. And for those of you who have known Bill and Betty this a good number of years, Patty and I had a chance to break bread with them, and I think in every single apartment and townhome they lived in Aurora. And for any of you that know them, there was quite a few of them. Tower Road and Lowry and Buckley and Glendale, and it was just a wonderful time. And now, you know, they finally gotten the home up there, and you haven't moved in how many years now? Yeah, see, so it's been a long time. But I just want to share a couple more things, and I'll I don't want to be too long here. But I wanted to mention one time, you know, Bill's love for Betty. And, you know, I got a little inkling one time. We were at a wedding. It was Karen and John Bankel's wedding. And, you know, the music started. I think they had a DJ or what you had there that night. And I danced a couple dances with my wife, Patty, and I said, well, I think I'll go ask Betty to dance. And the next song happened to be a slow one. I said, oh, well. So I go and ask Betty. I says, Betty, would you like to dance? She says, yes, but let me go and ask Bill. And Bill gave permission. But, you know, I got a kind of inkling that Bill maybe could be a little jealous at times. He loved his Betty. And then just a couple more stories here real quick. You know, a thing to note, everybody's mentioned about Bill being in the Army, and, you know, Bill didn't serve in his particular specialty that he was trained for. It's an amazing story, you know, serving in Hawaii and what he did, becoming a chaplain's assistant, and it's just an amazing story. If Betty would share that with folks sometime. And you talk about blessed. Bill and Betty, they've just been blessed from the very beginning, and I believe that they were made for each other. And but you know, my wife and I during the early days here, we adopted a pound puppy from the Dumb Friends League. And if you know my wife, she didn't particularly care for the name that the dog had. His name was Tequila. So she wasn't real happy with the name, so she says, you know what? We get home, it was that night. She says, I'll call Bill and Betty. And she talks to Bill, and Bill, she says, have you got some kind of a name that, you know, Hebrew name that we could use to replace the name Tequila? Right off the bat, as Mike talked about, he had an answer for you. Sure, call him Tehillah, praise. So the dog became very, you know, a visitor to the Havaraz and everything else, and we had him for a long time, but Tehillah became his name. There's so many other things to say, but I just, you know, Bill had this depth of spirit, and people have mentioned he was a voracious reader. You could sit down and talk to him about anything, and behind the scenes, the liturgy meister. And I know that I told Bill one of the last times we were together, I said, Bill, you know, you struck a balance between you and Bert. Bill was big liturgy, and Bert, okay, so much. But they struck a balance in this congregation, I think, and I think that with what is being done and his prayer books and so forth, I just think it's an example for Messianic congregations, and there's many that are using it today. But I just want to quote this one thing that it's sweet and sour. We know where Bill is. He was probably last evening doing Havra service, and this morning maybe even doing Shakrit. But Bill will live on in our hearts, and there's a quote from this guy by the name of Thomas Campbell: "To live in hearts we leave behind is not to die." And Bill will always remain alive in our hearts, mine, my wife's, and I'm sure everybody here tonight. And we loved him. We love you, Betty. We love you, all of you. And we just thank you for being our friends.
Well, Betty, Elaine, and Bernie, and families, it's with much sorrow that Deb and I offer our heartfelt condolences to all of you. Husband, father, grandfather, and friend, Bill will be greatly missed in all of our lives and in so many ways. Pastor Bill was a friend to many. For Deb and I, he was our friend. It's hard to know sometimes just when friendships begin, but Deb and I, we do recall when we became friends with Betty and Bill. They first invited us to a picnic in the mountains on a Memorial weekend. And Deb and Betty planned things, and Betty says, be sure that you bring some books and some games along. But, okay, we'll do that. And so Betty and Deb planned the food, and that was all fine. And we were fairly new at Roeh, and we thought that meeting with Pastor Bill and Betty was kind of a kind gesture, just get to know each other and to learn more about Roeh. Well, Betty, we've kidded, about those books and games. We took those things just in case we didn't have much to talk about and things got quiet. Well, we talked, and we talked, and we talked. There were no silent moments. We just had a great visit. And we talked and picnicked all day long until evening. And then we went out to dinner, and we talked still more. And that was the beginning of our friendship with you, Betty and Bill. More than a few years ago, Bill and I met for breakfast before his drive down to Roeh. And I just wanted to meet and get to know Bill a little bit better. Not that our conversations were spiritual, but just friend to friend. We did have similar medical issues that we sorted out and such, but just to be his friend, what could I be praying about for him? Over time, our time together was better and better, and Bill began to realize that it wasn't time to have him listen to my problems or questions, but connecting on a friendship that was solid. Well, ordering breakfast always brought a smile to me. Bill would look at the early bird menu. He would read the whole thing. It was just one page, but he would read the whole thing. And finally, he would tell our waitress, Susie, I'll have the Olympian, steak rare, eggs done soft. Could I get an English muffin? Well, the next time we met and ordered, first Bill would look at the early bird menu. He read the whole thing. And then he would tell Susie, I'll have the Olympian, steak rare, eggs done soft, and an English muffin. The same ordering pattern all the time. But needless to say, Susie, she would smile too. She'd come up, and she knew the routine. And we know that Bill was kind of into routines somewhat. But rarely, Bill did order something a little different. It was called the Hercules. A rare steak, home fries, and English muffin. This is my friend Bill. Well, Deb and I learned so much from the Bible studies that Bill taught. He was very gifted that way. Being patient with everyone's questions and thoughts. Deb and I were blessed also with vacations spent with Bill and Betty, and of course Keith and Elaine and John and Sarah. Fun times laughing till our sides hurt. One of our trips was to Hot Sulphur Springs, and Bill asked if I'd be interested in soaking with him in the hot springs. I said, sure. Just like the menu thing, Bill knew everything about the different pools there at the hot springs, the different temperatures and so forth. I guess there's a kind of a procedure that's recommended. And so anyhow, so we started out in the comfortable warm pool. We'd loosen up and just stretch a little bit, and it felt good. And I thought, Bill, this is nice. This is good. Then he suggested moving over into the other pool. He said, it's a little warmer. And I said, that's okay. We'll be fine. And I could tell that Bill was really getting into it now, getting into that warmer pool, because he was a little bit more relaxed. But he wasn't quite there yet. It was the third or fourth pool that was so hot. It was there that Bill spoke another language. As my friend Bill lowered himself into the water, and the water over his shoulders, he said, ah. Not in pain, but in total relaxed and a relaxed state. My language upon entering the steamy pool was, yikes! And Bill just smiled. He says, it's warmer, isn't it? As I began to adjust to the warmer, steamy water, all I could muster with the new language was, oh! And now I was speaking his language that he knew. Our rabbi, our Bible study teacher, our friend, my friend, Deb and I appreciated his leading us in the ancient paths to worship the King of Kings and Lord of Lords and our Messiah. The liturgy that Bill was so passionate about would lead us into worship to hear the word of God proclaimed by Pastor Bert powerfully. Our memories of times with our friend Bill are precious. He meant so much to us. His love and devotion is a lasting memory of his life, our friend, and my friend Bill.
Couple of scriptures and the sampling of the last sound you will hear in this life.
From the book of 2 Corinthians. at chapter 5, beginning at verse 6. Therefore, being always of good courage, and knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. For we walk by faith and not by sight. So be of good courage, I say, and prefer rather to be absent from the body and to be at home with the Lord.
Ready to go. I am sorry there. This reading is from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and thus we shall always be with the Lord. Therefore, comfort one another with these words. Amen.
You can all stand. You don't want to get up to heaven sitting down, do you? You want bagpipe? We have many firsts in this congregation. We have the premier we had for 27 years, Chazan. We also have the only shofar blower and in a kilt. Only Messianic congregation in the world who is now, for the sake of the family, going to play on another ancient instrument. And then we shall be dismissed. was sure hoping for Elijah to come in when he left. I know it ain't Passover, but receive the blessing. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'echumnecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yatzem lecha shalom. B'shem Yeshua. Amen. May the peace of our Lord be with you. Vayehi or. Button gives me power. There is food and a lot of it.